Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella, Herrera. Maricella, how are you doing? How's it going today?
It's going well. It's going well. I feel like it's been a slow morning for me today for some reason, mainly because I think I'm hitting that pandemic wall. But it happens.
Yeah, it does. It does happen. I think I was in that place, and then I recently judged the Big East pitch competition. So for any basketball fans out there, the Big East is one of the conferences, and any sports fan actually, not just basketball. But the Big East is one of the conference, and Villanova is in that, and that's my alma mater. So I had the great honor of judging a pitch competition where there's one team from each schools, like UConn, Georgetown, Xavier, St. John's, Seton Hall, Villanova. And I got to kind of get a peek into the innovation and minds and creativity of this generation of students. And it was so cool. Like, it was really cool. I mean, some of the ideas and passions that they were, coming forth with was inspiring. And I think it was kind of like the little kick I needed to get me out of the pandemic funk and to just get, really excited about this next generation and the impact they're going to have on this world.
That's good. I need to get a little bit of a kick too. It's sunny today, so I'll go out and I hope that helps, but I am hitting a wall. And I'm trying to be kind to myself. I feel like everyone I talk to is going through something like similar of like getting to that point where you are done. So done. Being kind to yourself, I think, is the biggest thing.
I agree. Especially if you are in the U.S. right now, it is winter time. Weather's pretty poor, and especially in regions where it typically hasn't been. Texas, we see you, we're thinking about you and supporting you and wishing you all the best. Coupled with that, we're staying at home and working from home and probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the four walls we're in. And so I know for many of our listeners, this may be a tough time, but please know we're here to support you. You have this community to tap into. It's certainly been an incredibly powerful tool that I have learned to appreciate even more over the past year of being, able to connect with others, hear their stories, gain their inspiration, be curious, continue to learn and push myself as a leader and professional. And I have never been so grateful for the Ellevate Network community. And I encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
Yeah, please do, because it is great. It is a great community of incredible people. And, you said you're grateful, and that's why I think I will never let anyone take gratitude off of our value list, because it really is. I always say it. I'm so grateful to be working at a place that I like, that I love, but speak with people that are genuinely smart and who I admire, and also building relationships with a community of just incredible women who are there for you. It's good. It makes me feel good.
Yes. So tap into that, Maricella, today after you run. Physical fitness, also very important. But we talked today, our guest today, Shibani Joshi, actually talks a lot about this as well. She, spent her career, had twists and turns, finding the right place to realize her vision and her purpose, to do the meaningful work, and ultimately to make a career pivot, to focus full time on as a caregiver. And she talks very honestly about those experiences, how to navigate those times, some of the emotions that are associated with that, especially around self-worth and identity, and how to focus on self-healing and to continue to move forward in a new mindset and a new light. And I think that is such an important conversation. Many of us throughout our careers and lives whether you're a caregiver or not, whatever your situation is, there's going to be times where we maybe question what that purpose is, or that impact, or where we're going. Sometimes we make decisions and that's hard, and we lose sight of ourselves, or we question, who we are, what we're doing. And I want to say that that's normal. Please know you're not alone. But in those times, just as Maricella and I were talking about earlier, it's important to know, there's resources you can tap into. There's learnings, there's community, there's support. And Shibani talks a great deal about that and the importance of, taking that time to really support yourself.
Really need that conversation today. So.
Well, we're going to get to that conversation now, and we'll see all of you back here next week for the Ellevate podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast.
Thanks, Kristy, for having me.
I am eager to hear your story. I know it's something that has really defined so much of where your life has gone and where you are today. And I'm hoping that you would share a little bit about that story with our audience. Tell us about you and how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. So today I'm a freelance broadcast journalist. I'm a host and I do a bunch of different things on my own in the tech and the business space, but this is not what I studied to do. And this actually was a dream that I had in my heart when I was a child, but I was almost too embarrassed and too scared to tell people about it. I grew up in Oklahoma. My parents are from India. And, I grew up with the message that a lot of immigrant children have, which is go for a more traditional path, engineering, science, this and that. And so I studied pre-med at the University of Oklahoma, but then also took finance classes because finance was just something that came easier to me, was exciting to me. And I thought, well, I can kind of use it to figure out it's going to help me no matter what. I ended up graduating with a finance and accounting degree with pre-med, and then just decided I don't want to be a doctor, and had this dream, this wild dream out of Oklahoma to go work on Wall Street. And I pounded the pavement and did something that's hard to do if you don't go to a certain school. Is I got into the investment banking program at Morgan Stanley. Was one of the few sort of non-Ivy, non-traditional graduates to get in. And it was, a huge step up in my life. It just showed me how smart and incredible and charismatic and full of potential people are. And I thought, wow, I had gotten my dream job. I'm working on Wall Street. And then I did that for a couple of years, working 100 hours a week, going to work on the weekends. And I just realized, you know what, this is not what I want to do. I like media, but I'm not sure how to figure this out. So I ended up taking a year off to travel. And then I came back to New York, actually, the day before September 11th, the World Trade Center attacks. And I really gave me another reason to really start thinking about, well, what is it that I want to do? And for me, media was always a passion, but finance and business were my competencies. And so what I started to do over the course of the next few years is try to find a way to merge them. I took a production assistant job at CNN, making $20-something thousand after making six figures on Wall Street. I was waking at 3 a.m. and, paying my dues. And eventually I said, okay, this is kind of where I want to be, but I want more skills. So I ended up applying to business school, attended Harvard Business School, and came out and still was not quite sure business media. And I ended up taking a business development strategy job doing digital media at Disney ABC Networks. And there I was working on the strategy for ABC News, how to get content out, how to sell stuff, what price should we sell it at. It was the first, in my group, was the first time that Disney had sold something to iTunes. And it caused shockwaves in the industry. We started charging for stuff. But I was walking every day on the newsroom floor, and Peter Jennings was there, and they were launching a lot of content. And I just said, my heart just wants to be here. And so after I had done, my work, I had asked the people I work with, and I said, could I try some tapings? You guys are launching a new digital network. Can I, help out? And they were very eager. They were like, sure. And from there, that's where I sort of got bitten by the bug of doing on-air journalism work. And I started to take classes at NYU, do stuff on the weekends, eventually left, got picked up by Fox Business Network. And that really kind of it ushered in sort of a chapter 2 of my life and really became a nice merger of all the things that I'm good at and I'm passionate about.
Thank you. Have you seen the TV show Firefly Lane on Netflix?
I have not seen it. It is on my queue of things that I need to add to watch.
It was just, the main characters are in journalism, so it's just like making me think of that kind of that exploration of how our careers evolve. And I can really your story resonates with me. I was this English sociology major who went into investment banking, and I'm very passionate about how we explore the non-traditional career paths, because I think that diversity of thought and experience is really important, and clearly is part of what led you to where you are today. But I'm curious, where on your journey, and so many of our listeners are probably thinking, I want more purpose. I want how do I connect, my dreams or my interests with my income and my impact? And it oftentimes feels hard to attain or to get started or to even name what that is. Do you have any advice for, how you go about that process of really developing that career that is fulfilling and that matters to
Absolutely. You? I think this is something that most people that I know, and probably you too, Kristy, spend a lot of time thinking about and desiring. I think there are a few people that are born and kind of just know what their purpose is. And for the rest of us, we have to it takes time. And I think there's a couple of things that I did that I would advise people to do. So the first is introspect. So you can't know what you want to do without taking the time to dig deeper and discover what that is. And that can be in taking classes at night. That can be doing workshops. That can be interning at places. That could be traveling. I did a lot of introspection when I traveled, and I just thought, wow, what makes me feel alive, and what do I want to go back to? I think introspection is the first place to start. And then after that, experimentation. Because again, so few of us know exactly what we want to do. And my career and your career, it sounds like as well, came about and is emerging through an experimentative process. You go in and you take a job or a role and you see how that fits. And then you learn something, you get what you want from it, and then you move on because you're growing and you're evolving. And so I think allowing yourself to take your own time, have your own path, and experiment is really important. And then the third thing that I would say is and this is hard to do for all of us I know that are listening to this, is to allow yourself the space and the room to fail. And, I think that women who are hyper, successful, that are really into high achievement, that have, checked all the boxes, we kind of have this perfectionistic approach, and failure feels like, wow, we just can't do it. But when we turn our mind to excellence instead of perfection, and learning instead of getting everything right, I think you give yourself the space and the room to say, I'm going to try this. And in failure, you learn, and you learn so much. And that is really the only way that you learn is really by failing. Giving yourself space to do that has been, and myself, a real opportunity for me to grow and get to my growth edge.
I'm curious about that because, as you're talking, I'm visualizing this, idea of sort of falling backwards or failing. I don't think failure is always our intent. You go into something wanting to succeed, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And how have you learned to lean into those times when it's not going to be a success? And then, also what actions do you take? If something's failing, if something's not working, when do you know to dig in your heels and keep trying, or to take that next leap, to take that next risk?
Yeah, that's a great question, because in some opportunities, in some circumstances, you can act, you can get smarter, you can work harder, and you can overcome things. In other circumstances, you just can't. You have to know when to say, I'm done. Maybe I'm not suited for this, or this is not my path. And I think that only you can know what that means. But, one of the things that I would say about myself is I am a risk taker, but I am not risky. And I think that there is a difference in that everything that I do, I'm not afraid to take risks, but I take calculated strategic risks. So when I wanted to go do an on-air career, I didn't give up my day job, didn't have any income left, just kind of starting from scratch. I methodically, and I did this with getting my job on Wall Street. I did this with getting my job at Fox. I did this when I left Fox. I did the hard work. I think what they called is like moonlighting back in the old days. But I took classes at night. I would drive to Jersey and work at sort of a Bollywood TV station and do hosting things. I took local news gigs to get that experience. And so I knew that there was stuff that I could do to become stronger, to increase my chances of not failing, of succeeding. And I think there's lots of things that we can do like that to be prepared, to be more prepared when you take risks. And then after that, once you're in these sort of level up, next level opportunities, you're going to have to be okay with the discomfort. That was something that I also experienced, and I still experience to this day, is I get put in circumstances that are new, that sometimes I feel like, wow, I didn't go to school for journalism. I mean, the first probably year that I was on TV, I was kind of a disaster, but not enough of a disaster to get fired, but kind of like I was learning every single time, and I was so uncomfortable, and I was in a zone that I had never been in, which was like, I wasn't the best. And that can present a wonderful opportunity. Now, I would say that if that feeling, Kristy, lasted 2 years, 3 years, that would be for me a signal I'm not well suited for this. You have to figure out what your own threshold for pain is, for lack of a better word. Figure out what you can do, what buttons you can tweak, what learning you can do, how you can advance your skill set, but also be willing to walk away when something doesn't serve you anymore.
And you're in media, about storytelling. And I think as we look to make those pivots in our career, to follow our passion or do something new, one of the biggest challenges is being able to get the person on the other end to believe in you. We live in a business society where, it's people are checking the box and like you said, did you go to this school, or do you have these skills? What is your background? And are you the right candidate for this role? And so when you want to make that pivot, or you want to try that new thing that you believe in, that you're excited about, like, how do you bring others along in that journey to believe in you too?
That's also a great question. I mean, I think everything starts with authenticity. I think that when you know with conviction who you are, what you want, and I don't think it's an end game. I'm in my 40s and I'm still learning who I am. And I think that who I am is going to evolve and develop at each year that I live. But the one thing that I have learned over time is people are going to say what they want to say. People will always have advice. And I think that we have to be educated shoppers or consumers. I think it's important for us to get input and advice and do our research. But at the end of the day, this is your one wild and precious life. And you you have to choose when you're ready with that conviction that you have to move forward, and people will come along. Yes, you have to storytell. Yes, you have to connect the dots. You know, one of the things that after I left Fox, I left Fox to to transition to part-time work and take more time to be with my kids. And that was a time of struggle where I felt like, okay, I'm going to have to I want to get back into it. I want to get back into work. I'm going to have to storytell, but we have to believe in ourselves. We have to not think of our mistakes, our maybe our nonlinear path as a source of weakness. I mean, when I go in there, when I go in and when I started revamping and going back to full-time work, I had this kind of chip on my shoulder, and I realized nobody else was putting that on me. This is me. This is my concept of what I think I should have been doing, which is working full-time, having 3 kids, trying to manage all of these things. That I'm rewriting my own rules. And when you do that, you liberate yourself, and your conviction comes through, your authenticity comes through, and you don't need to. It's nice to have other people to come along, but they may or may not. And as we get older, we have to let go of those expectations.
I can really relate with that. I, had spent a number of years in a career that, to be honest, was my top priority. I spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and time in that role. And then I just reached a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I had my first child, and I decided to take some time and to be home. And that was really hard for me. My identity and so much of what how I defined myself was tied within that career. And I know you've had a similar experience. Would you mind sharing some of that and how you navigated that?
Yeah. I think finding ourselves is one of the, was one of the privileges of life. It's one of the things that we're here for. Eckhart Tolle, he writes, we're here for a collective purpose and also an individual purpose. And I very much believe that's true. I believe that work is part of that purpose. And one of the messages that kind of drives me crazy right now and some of the new age self-help stuff is that, you have to give up your day job and you have to become a healer, or you have to serve others in certain ways in order to really have purpose. That, almost implying that women in business and people in business who take a corporate or professional path aren't full of purpose. And that makes me mad. It really does, because I believe that business does serve a purpose. I believe that we can have a purposeful career taking a more professional corporate track. I think that comes from, and I'm not disparaging anyone, because I don't think that that's not what I'm about, but I just think that comes from a place of kind of not knowing. It's easier to judge than to kind of understand. And my one of the hardest parts of my life was when I decided to leave my job at Fox and shift to part-time work. We moved from New York, and my husband took a transfer with his office, and we put the emphasis on his career. And I had 2 with a 3rd child on the way. And I just said, I kind of am at the end of the road with this career. I have 3 kids. I want to focus on them. And yes, it's a privilege to be able to make that choice, but I had the biggest crisis of my life, because everything that I had worked hard for, Kristy, and you try to get to the right school, you try to have the right job, you are your work. And then what happens to you when you don't have a job to go to? What happens to you when you leave that environment, your friends, everything that made you who you are? I called myself a series of past tenses. I used to live in New York. I used to work on Wall Street. I used to, have all these friends, and I dropped into an environment in San Diego where nobody knew my background. They had no context. I had to reestablish who I was, and I had to reestablish who I was from this place of not being oriented around work. And that created a huge existential crisis for me. Who am I without my work? I felt that I was kind of nothing. And at some point, we all get to that point because we retire, our company gets bought, a health crisis comes into play. We have to examine who we are. And this is why I always come back to introspection. We have to be in that place of introspection all along our lives, all around, all throughout our careers, and come from this purposeful place, this grounded place. Yes, our work can serve a purpose, but our work is not our purpose. It is part of what we do to execute on it. And that was, and it took me a really long time. I mean, it took me about 2 or 3 years to really get out from underneath that. And now I've come out, I'm working full time again. But I'm coming from a much different place of not being insecure, of not needing to be perfect, of not needing to adorn myself like a Christmas tree with all these ornaments of I worked here, I do this, I do that. Instead, it's what I do. It's not who I am. And that takes a long time to get to. And I don't think that I'm done by any stretch.
Yeah, no, it is a journey. And, there's so much to unpack when you think about just the society we live in, and from early ages, why we go to school. Oh, it's to go to college or to get a job or to, all these things that we're told, and how success is defined. And it's, takes as much time to unpack all of that and to, really define who you are in your own terms, as it does for someone else to do that for you over time. But it's a process, and it's an intentional process of questioning all of these assumptions and, really becoming more comfortable with who we are and what we want. I've also been hearing from, I was just coming off of, before we started this conversation, so it's top of mind, a roundtable for working caregivers. Ellevate's been convening small groups over the past year to make sure we're having these discussions, we feel supported, we're creating that safe space. And one of the things that I personally shared was that, I feel like I'm on autopilot. I'm just, sometimes days taking care of the kids, doing my job, doing this, doing that, checking the boxes, getting through all the to-dos. And I think in those moments when we're just, burn out or going from one thing to the next, the finding that purpose, living in it, really relishing it and enjoying it and enjoying the work that you do can be lost.
Absolutely. I think that the hardest part for me about this, pandemic has been many of the hard parts. I don't feel joyful every day, and I feel guilty for it. I feel guilty that I have, I know you have children, and I have 3 kids too. And there are days where just logging onto Zoom and getting lunch on the table is all I can do, and it doesn't fill my bucket. And emotions are rearing high, theirs and mine as well. I mean, there's days where I just feel like I'm not happy. And I think that, a couple of the things that stick with me during this time. One, we have to be okay with our process and the ebbs and flows. So we can't go to this place of gratitude without feeling the grief. And I was really in this sort of mournful, grief-ridden spot. And I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't myself either. Around Thanksgiving and around the holidays, where normally it was a time to reconnect and reconvene and full of family. And we weren't having the experiences that are, that we've built up in our expectations. But I kept telling myself, I should be, we're healthy and I can work from home and all of these things. But when I went to that place of allowing myself to feel my feelings, then I could move through into the place of gratitude. Because if we're not able to experience grief and anger and sorrow and all the things that we're all feeling right now, that we're entitled to feel, even if we're in a place of privilege. And I think that, we've come to learn about all the inequities, and even we're on the cusp of learning about all of the inequities. And we want to be a part of the solution, but we also feel our own feelings. And I think to anyone who's listening and to the struggling moms out there is, just let yourself feel how you feel, and then take those small moments when you get them. I mean, I took my kids out. My kids are fighting like cats and dogs right now, and it's just really hard. And I always go into this place of like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong as a mom that, my kids are behaving this way? And I'm reminded when I talk to others, it's, there's so many other factors at play with how their behavior is. So take the wins when you get them. We went on a hike, and the three of them were holding hands and hugging each other. And I took a picture, and I was just like, oh my God, like, thank goodness they love each other. Deep down, they love each other. And we have these moments where we just feel the joy. And I think that that we have to experience the moments that we have them, feel all of our feels, take the wins when we get them, and know this is not going to be forever. A lot of what I do is also talk to experts in the business about the future of work. And Kristy, to your point, I think the future of work is going to have to include this recognition that we as women shoulder so much more burden in terms of being CEO of our households. I think people are starting to see it, all genders, all parts of societies, and the future of work is going to need to include more solutions for us as women. And now we can talk about it because everybody gets it. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's a necessary thing. And we have to, I've said I'm hopeful for the future, because I think we had to go through some hard times breaking down a lot of the structures and systems that exist in our workplaces in order to be able to truly build something better. And what has been happening, for the past couple of years at least is lots of band-aids, like, not changing what's wrong, but, how do we put a Band-Aid on this? How do we add something new that's supposed to work, but it doesn't work if, the structures and systems don't work. So, but yeah, I mean, this shines, specifically in the US, outside of the US too, although it's been very, US is far behind many other countries and regions when it comes to these issues, is, just the impact that this has on caregivers. And part of that, I've been thinking about this a lot, which is, I used to work in an office, and I would leave my house. And when I left my house, I was leaving the laundry and the cooking, and, the kids were at school, and I was left everything behind, and I put on my professional identity, and I went into the office, and I was professional Kristy. Then I would come home, and I was, mom or partner. And all of that is intertwined right now. And, how do we carve out our identity, and how do we, continue working on that and staying true to that when it feels that, it's kind of, I'm visual. So I think of there's this book, The Color Kittens, and they are exploring how to make colors, and all the colors come together and it's brown, right? Yeah. And that's what life feels like. It's like all come together in, every moment you are, have 3 different identities, 4 different identities, wearing all these different hats. And you don't get a chance to just be one thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge desire of the modern workforce, and it's the concept of your whole self, right? And that's something that in my work I've started to teach at the MBA level, a class about leadership communications and emotional intelligence. And this concept of bringing your whole self to work is that whenever I survey my students, most of us think, yeah, for the most part, I'm my whole self. But when you take a lot of these assessment tests, you realize that you're not. And the disparity is even wider. So for white males, the data shows that they tend to be more of themselves, although there's always masking going on. And then females, and then people of color, women of color, tend to have the biggest gap in disparity between their personal life and their professional lives. And I think the workplace of the future is going to create more openness to vulnerability, because we've already started to open the door to that, to talk about our mental health. We've had, kids walking in on conference calls and showing up on Zoom calls. We're already starting to break down those barriers. And we're at a real turning point for our workforce culture, which is, I think, going to be, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take decades, but I think this is going to be a major catalyst for that. And the other thing that I would say is, before I stopped working, before I left Fox, I can say that I always had this bias towards stay-at-home moms. And, whenever I would, email with another mom who had a child at my child's school, I'd say, I'm really busy. And, she might say, yes, I can, I'll get back to you tomorrow. And I would think kind of condescendingly, like, why are you so busy? And we have this inherent bias, I think, towards, I know I did as a working mom. And then I became a stay-at-home mom, and I just realized, like, oh my gosh, this is harder than I want to go to work, because it's a vacation to go to work. And now everybody's also having that shared experience. And I think there's also some of that reprogramming that's happening within us as women. And I think also for men, because for us to have real change, we need to get the men on board. We're seeing all of this stuff, but I also think there's a lot of pressure and bias that we have towards one another as women. And this, working women versus stay-at-home moms and all of this stuff, and homeschooling and this and that, we're beginning to break down those barriers. And I think, again, that vulnerability and that connectivity is going to create better solutions for us, not just in the workplace, but with childcare and in our communities as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Shibani, this has been such an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed this. It's something I'm passionate about, and clearly you are too, and we've got so much more to discuss. But I wanted to get to know a little bit more about you as a person. We always do this lightning round, which is kind of a fun way to delve deeper into who you are and what makes you tick. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and if you could respond in a word or two. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I am an introvert.
What is your favorite day of the week?
Well, every day seems the same right now, so it's hard to tell. But I get energized by my Fridays.
Who would be your dream dinner guest?
It would be one of my grandparents.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Definitely an early bird.
What's your pet peeve?
Not sticking to your word.
All good stuff here. What is your morning staple? What do you need to kick the day off?
I need alone time. So that means I have to get up before everybody and just be by myself and have peace and quiet.
I think also as a fellow introvert, the alone time is really central to to just being able to make that space.
And really lacking during the pandemic.
So true. What is your favorite recent read?
Letting Go, I think by David Hawkins is his name.
What's your top self-care practice?
I think alone time and alone time in the bath. I'm doing a lot of Epsom salt baths these days.
Lovely. And do you have a final thought you want to leave with our listeners today?
I just, the one thing that I probably needed to hear when I was going along through my career and my personal life was everybody does stuff at their own timing. Take advice from people, learn from other people, read, but nobody knows your life, your circumstances, your purpose, your goals better than you. And everybody has their own timing. So don't fret that it didn't happen 5 years ago. It will happen when it's meant to happen, and you are the doer, not anyone else.
A perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes. Give us 5 stars and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Ellevate NTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
92% because of a bike?
Not just bikes. We also make treadmills and rowers.
Oh, let me guess, for elite athletes only, right?
Nope. It doesn't matter if you're an avid exerciser or new to working out. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try Peloton bikes, tread, or row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.